You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, Episode 82, The End of GameStop?
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 82 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Salutations, Brian.
So today we're going to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly in geek culture. Mostly good. But before we do that, I've got a little bit of housekeeping that we need to do. This was pointed out to me by a couple of people. Last week, we were talking about Kickstarter and the dangers that Kickstarter has for a lot of us gamers who want to keep our money. Now, if you're the type of person who doesn't care about that and
expendable income.
If you got expendable income, I will point out that a friend of mine, Tim Phillips, did start a Kickstarter today for his board game called Stacked. It's sort of a Jenga meets Tetris. It's a board game. He's been playtesting it for a couple years now, and it's now out on Kickstarter, so if you want to spend some money on a game, you can start there. But why I brought up Kickstarter was last week I was talking about a couple of games that I had backed because I was interested in, and the first one, of course, being Trial by Trolley, and then you... Yes. Of course, Mandy, you and I got into a philosophical discussion, as we are wont to do.
Yes.
So much so, in fact, I didn't mention the second game. Now, some people didn't notice it, but some people damn well did. So they were like, Brian, what was the second game?
The other game. Well, Trial by Trolley was so interesting.
Right. So basically, what I'm doing is just to let you know what the second game is, since we didn't mention this, and I feel kind of bad because this is actually a game I think you're going to be interested in.
Okay.
Because you've been interested in the past.
I have.
You have. We've played it before. Bully Pulpit Games has basically, after 10 years of putting out the game they're famous for and getting questions from people and testing and all of that, they have now come out with the second edition, streamlined version of Fiasco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've played Fiasco before.
Yeah, you basically have dice and a sheet. So now you have like a game, a word, and...
Yeah, so basically the way this new version of Fiasco is going to play is that instead of using dice, it's now card-based.
Okay.
And so you're still going to be able to do all the stuff you could do in Fiasco, it's just more streamlined, and it's actually easier and faster to set up and start playing. Mm-hmm. So I saw that, and I'm like, well, I'm a huge Fiasco fan. You and I have played Fiasco more than once.
Now, it's very, very dependent on role-playing. So is that still going to be a big part of it? Okay.
Yeah, basically what they've done is they've streamlined the mechanics to make it easier to execute the mechanics. Mm-hmm. And by making it more card-based than using the dice, it makes it easier to get the game set up and ready to go.
Okay.
So basically, what they did was they talked to a lot of the people who've played the game and have taken suggestions, and they've tweaked the rules. And so now we have this new version that'll come in a box. So it looks more like a board game, but the game mechanics have been simplified and streamlined so that you're going to be able to, like I said, get started right away. Just lay everything out and you're ready to go. There's not as much setup. The turn-by-turn stuff is a lot cleaner, is my understanding. And so
are you still able to download scenarios and
well, they will be coming
plots?
out with they're going to be coming out with scenario. The set that I've got will have 4 different scenarios. Mm-hmm. The scenarios are set up on cards now, but part of the Kickstarter is the ability to print out blank cards. And so what you can do with that is you can take the old sets and you can make the cards for them.
Okay.
And I think eventually what they're going to do is I think they're going to actually print out most of the play sets, but that won't be necessary. But what that also allows you to do is that you can mix and match cards now. So you can do sort of a cross-genre game if you want.
Okay.
So if you want to do a haunted house in space, well, that's called Alien. But you can do that now. Mm-hmm. And you can also, it allows you...
I think more Event Horizon, because Alien's more like a monster film. The Fly and the Blob and...
Yeah, we'll have our ADD moment. The reason I consider it a haunted house movie is the point of a haunted house is it allows the monster more avenues of attack because you can't tell where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of the haunted house. You don't know where the monster is, but they could be anywhere. And that, of course, is certainly the feeling in the first Alien movie. So to my mind, that's why I consider it a haunted house movie. It's a haunted spaceship movie, but that's basically what you have
just
going.
without ghosts.
Yeah, exactly. It's a monster, but pretty much the same thing. So I will Trial by Trolley and Fiasco. I'm supposed to be getting both of those in December, so that's going to be my Christmas. Hooray!
Aw.
And I'm sure, Mandy, as you play it, you'll have your opinions on it. We'll definitely talk about it here on the podcast. Now, a couple of podcasts ago, we talked about when ThinkGeek closed their doors and their website, and GameStop took them over and is going to be doing ThinkGeek type products in their stores. Well, it was just released today. I just saw the news article online. GameStop is going to be closing 180 to 200 stores of their underperforming stores by the end of the year. Right now, they've got 5,700 stores open. So this is a small piece. Now, I suspect that many of those stores are probably here in West Virginia.
I know of 3. So, within like traveling distance, well, what I consider traveling distance, I know of 3. So I figure at least, 1 or 2 of those are going to go.
Now, the question I have is, after these 200 stores, are there any more coming? And I suspect that that's going to be the case. I think this is honestly the first wave of store closings, and that this may be the beginning of the end for GameStop. Mm-hmm. Of course, they mostly sell, video games, console games, and even the president of GameStop said the world is changing and we need to pivot. But I really wonder where they're going to pivot to. I mean, where was Blockbuster going to pivot to save their stores? I don't see a place for it. I mean, we are getting to a point now, especially we've been talking for weeks about the streaming wars that are coming. But because of the fact that we have all these streaming services now, and there's just so much stuff online, internet's getting faster and faster, there's been a greater demand for it, and because of all the bandwidth that we have now, the necessity of buying physical data to buy a disc or a card or something to put into a machine to play a game, there's no real point to that anymore. I mean, most everything now is downloadable content. I have a machine that's got Windows 10 on it, and I don't own a Windows 10 disc. I work in technology. I've never seen a Windows 10 disc. I'm sure they exist. I've just never seen one. Mm-hmm. So basically,
I'm a floppy disk.
I'm not saying I'm that old, but I am. But I mean, the need for physical medium we don't need it anymore. In fact, how many people buy movies anymore? I mean, you stream movies now. You don't buy discs. Mm-hmm. Certainly not as much as you used to. And so there's really not a need to go to a store and buy a game. I mean, most everything now is downloadable content. Even games that have, you go buy the physical disc, they're still downloadable content. Mm-hmm. But most games now are going to strict downloadable content. And for gaming companies, that's awesome. I mean, not having this expense of having to design the cover art, to buy and press discs. I mean, it's going to be cheaper for them to get games out. And it makes it easier for them also for patches and all that stuff. And so where GameStop is going to pivot to save their business, I'm not sure. Not unless they completely change their business model. And I honestly don't think that bringing in ThinkGeek stuff is going to be the magic bullet to save them. I mean, besides games, they sell a lot of, collectibles and things like that, but the majority of that stuff you can get on Amazon, so why are you going to go to a store? Honestly, I think that this is going to be about the end for GameStop. I'll give them maybe another year, a year and a half, but we'll have to see what happens. Now, this is something else that just broke today that I saw in the news. Warner Media has just cut a massive deal with JJ Abram's Bad Robot. Basically, it's a 5-year deal for Bad Robot. It'll last until about 2024 at the very earliest. Now, they might redo a deal, and I suspect that that'll happen, but this deal will come to an end 2024. And it basically means that Bad Robot is going to be exclusive for Warner Media, which means Warner Brothers Pictures, that'll be HBO, that'll be HBO Max streaming service. And so everything Bad Robot to this point on is going to be through Warner. I mean, keep in mind, if you've never heard of JJ Abrams and Bad Robot, then why are you listening to this podcast? Of course, they're credited partially with, reviving Star Trek, Star Wars, Mission Possible series, Westworld's intellectual properties, on top of a lot of other things. I gotta say, this is a good get. This is a really good get for Warner Brothers. Having JJ Abrams and Bad Robot to help them, reboot their franchise. Now, I'm not saying they're going to work on DC, but I can't see that they wouldn't. But having them and having their resources to help get things started for them, it's going to be solid. I think this is a really good get for them. I mean, right now, Warner Brothers are doing really good in horror. But when you think of JJ Abrams, of course, you also think of Cloverfield. So they can play in that world too.
8mm.
Yeah, exactly. So being able to develop movies and television, I think that this is, especially, again, we've been talking about the streaming wars. This may give HBO Max a real boost to make them a real player in the game. Because the only other thing they've got going, of course, is DC Universe, that streaming service. And there have been rumors going on for a while now that it's not going to last, that they're going to shut down. I don't know if that's true or not. I think a lot of that talk came from the stuff that went on with Swamp Thing, which we talked about on the podcast. But now that we've got Bad Robot, if there are problems with DC Universe, I think they can fix them. Again, I think this is really going to depend upon how much Warner Brothers is going to allow Bad Robot and JJ Abrams how much autonomy they're going to give them. I think JJ Abrams certainly has the cachet that Warner Brothers is not going to feel like they're going to need to meddle too much.
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope. But yeah, this is a really good get for Warner Brothers, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this partnership blossoms over the next few months and over the next few years. Something else that I saw today in the news is there was a Deadline interview with James Cameron. This was during his filming for Avatars 2 and 3. And they asked him specifically about Avengers Endgame. Now, of course, he's been very magnanimous about
it beating out Titanic?
About beating out,
okay.
Yeah, and Avatar. And so they kind of pinned him down and they said, what do you think about this? And I found his response to be very interesting. And I have to say, I want to read you a couple of things out of the interview. These are quotes from him. When I asked him about Endgame beating out Avatar, he said, it gives me a lot of hope. Avengers Endgame is demonstrable proof that people will still go to the movie theaters. The thing that scared me most about making Avatar 2 and 3 was that the market might have shifted so much that it simply was no longer possible to get people that excited about going and sitting in a dark room with a bunch of strangers to watch something. Now, further on in the interview, he said, will Avatar 2 and 3 be able to create that same kind of success in the zeitgeist? Who knows? We're trying. Maybe we do. Maybe we don't. But the point is, it's still possible. I'm happy to see it. As opposed to an alternate scenario where the rapid availability, custom-designed experience that everybody can create for themselves with streaming services and all the different platforms, that theater potential might not have existed anymore. And so he basically said that with Endgame getting the success that it had, it basically meant that there was room for him to do the same, and that theater isn't dying. People are willing to go out to the theaters, which is good for him. And I think that's a really positive way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think in maybe some other cases, some people would not have been as positive about it, was able to see what that meant to them, the benefits that meant, that you could still develop excitement for a movie. But James Cameron, I think, was farsighted enough he was able to see the benefits of a movie like that, Endgame doing over 2 million, and that gave him a possibility of being able to do really well with Avatar 2 and 3, which I suspect that he will. But I thought that was
diplomatic.
I think it was a rare bit of positivity in Hollywood, which we don't get to see that often anymore, to be honest. So now I did get to see a couple of trailers, and I know that you got to see the final Doctor Sleep trailer.
Yes.
So what did you think?
Oh, I mean, it's still everything that I was looking for. A lot of stuff out of the book. We get to see the woman in the top hat, and we see the steam this time. We see her connection with Abra across, the chalkboards, and we see them, communicating and talking about The Shining. So obviously, as we've spoken about, so no spoilers here, in the book, the hotel burns. Well, in this movie, they go back to the hotel. So that's something that people who have read the book that's something new that we're going to see that we didn't get to know before. So that's going to be really cool.
Oh yeah, because apparently they're going to fight in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this before. The plan for the movie was going to be a hybrid of the movie and the book, the first movie and the book. And being able to do both of them, and of course to make both camps happy with everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, what Stephen King has had to say about the movie and what he felt about it. I mean, we all know
Shining.
about it. Yeah, about the original movie. Although it is definitely a classic for sure. Yeah, the fact that we're going to be able to meld those two worlds, I think is amazing. And yeah, what I saw there was fantastic. I also saw the trailer for the new Apple Plus show, See, the one with Jason Momoa.
Oh, with the blindness over
right. And so, of course, you have that, it's post-apocalyptic. And in the narration at the beginning, this idea that nature blinded mankind to slow down the destruction of the earth, and that, the earth was able to reclaim because of it. But now you have these two children that can see, these two infants. And so the plot of this is that sight is evil, considered evil in this modern society. And so they're wanting to kill these children because they think they're evil. And so Jason Momoa has to save them. And apparently this goes on for a while because I guess in the trailer you get to see the kids a little bit older. And so I guess it's going to be watching these kids grow up and come of age and see what they do to society, basically. Now that humans are basically nomadic tribes, literally stumbling around in the dark.
How do they even explain to the children that they are seeing? Because if it's something that, adults don't understand anymore, and trying to explain, this is something we don't have, you can see and no one else can.
Right.
I guess it'd be kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, because how do you describe sight to somebody who has it and you don't? Apparently, it's been generations since human beings had the power of sight. The only thing that they know is it's evil. And if you can see, then it's a bad thing. And you are a danger to the world if you can see.
So instead of thinking that they're crazy, talking about these, I guess visions and stuff, they're saying you're evil rather than you're crazy.
Right. They're like, you got to die.
Hunts. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can see the light, you're a terrible person. So, I mean, that definitely looks interesting. I did see another trailer and we talked about this for a minute in one of the podcasts for JoJo Rabbit. Well, JoJo Rabbit, it's the Taika Waititi Fox film that everybody's nervous about because it's a comedy about Hitler.
Oh.
Yeah, did we not? I think we may have mentioned it for about a minute. But
wait, is this where Hitler is someone's imaginary friend?
That's the one.
Okay, yep. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
And so there's a new trailer that came out a couple of weeks ago or a week or two ago that I've just seen, and I'm like, this is going to be interesting. I'm not sure how well it's going to do. I mean, this is daring. I mean, comedies are supposed to be daring. Right now, there's a lot of debate about how daring comedies are allowed to be and how.
So we're going Calvin and Hobbes, but instead of a tiger.
Yeah.
We're going an evil dictator.
We have an evil dictator. We have a kid who's a Hitler Youth who's a little bit confused. And then, to make things worse, he goes up in the attic and finds a Jewish girl hiding up in his attic. So now what do you do?
Wow.
Yeah. But, and it's a Jewish girl since it's a comedy, she has a sense of humor. She goes, do you know what I am? And he goes, a Jew. And she goes, Gesundheit. So, we got Taika Waititi who's written this movie and he's directing it and he plays Hitler. And we got ScarJo's in it. Scarlett Johansson's in it with a German accent. The thing about it is, what's funny about this movie, this was a Fox Searchlight film and Disney inherited it. So the thing is, it's like, well, it's got one of our because of course, Taika Waititi is directing the two Thor films. He directed, of course, Ragnarok. And he's directing, Love and Thunder. And so he's one of their guys, certainly. But now they got this Hitler movie that they're like, should we really? It's not really a Disney film, is it? Now, it's still coming out under Fox Searchlight. But, Disney Corporation, this is just kind of a weird film for them to have to...
Well, I guess, the producers, that's a comedy and then later became a musical, so...
Yeah. It's sort of the same situation that Disney finds himself in. they do a comedy, Springtime for Hitler. It starts doing really well. And they're like, that's not what we wanted. Of course, Disney isn't trying to put out a movie that tanks, but this movie, like I said, this is one of those taking a risk, definitely, because it's very easy to misconstrue this. And I've already seen, reviewers watch the trailer and be upset this movie's even coming out. So, reviewers don't have a whole lot of a sense of humor anymore, but this movie desperately needs to be funny, and it needs to be funny in the right way, because it could really tank otherwise. Because if it's not funny, it's really not going to be funny. But this is Taika Waititi, so I have faith in it, and I'm definitely going to see it, and we'll definitely talk about it. I'm glad this is not my decision to make, for sure. I also saw a trailer for The Lighthouse from the people who brought us The Witch. Robert Pattinson's in it, black and white film. And it looks and very much shot like a, like a 50s type of a film.
Okay.
It kind of has that Universal monster feel to it, but it's got that, the whole cabin fever feeling of being on a rock, being locked up in this lighthouse, nobody being around and, having a duty to do, but also being in a situation where, you can't get out and, you're kind of stuck there and you're just stranded in the middle of nowhere. And wow, I don't know if you've had a chance if you've seen the trailer at all.
I have no idea.
Now, did you ever see The Witch?
No.
No, yeah. So you got some catching up to do.
Okay.
But The Witch was one of those slow burn psychological things, which was polarizing. Some people really liked it. Like I really liked it. And Kevin, our friend Kevin, Polly really enjoyed it. Some people not so much because, again, it wasn't the roller coaster ride that most people go to horror movies to see, but it was really good. Mm-hmm. And it was very much like The Lighthouse now. It was a sort of an isolation. I mean, this was about a family who was cast out of their community. They never say exactly why that happened, but they were cast out. So they're building a house in the middle of the woods away from everybody. And so they're isolated. And so when weird things start to happen, they don't really have anybody to turn to. And so Lighthouse is definitely the same thing. Definitely looking forward to seeing. I mean, and because it's black and white and it's probably going to be a slow burn, it's probably going to play more like an indie film. Mm-hmm. I don't know how popular it's going to be, but I want to see more films like it for sure. And so we'll definitely check that out. Let's talk some streaming war stuff because, hey, it's the Geek Watch podcast and we always got to talk about the streaming wars. Apple TV just announced they are going to be, because we talked about C and we talked about some other shows that are coming out.
The Morning Show.
Mm-hmm. We may have already mentioned One Small Step, I think is what it's called.
Is that about how the Russians got to the moon first?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming out.
Alternate history.
And there's some other really interesting things coming out. Dickinson's. It is a telling of young Emily Dickinson.
Oh, yes. I have seen stuff for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Apple TV Plus will be coming out November the 1st. And the cost, $4.99 a month. So it's like, how are they? And we talked about this before. They're spending $1 million an episode for every show that they're doing, and they're doing a bunch of shows. $1 million an episode, and they're charging $4.99 a month for their service.
But they are putting things out weekly. They're not putting everything out, in one blow. So True. You have to be in it for the long run. 10 episodes in a season, so right. You're at least in there for 3 months.
Yep, that's true. Mm-hmm. Which is $15. I mean, think about it. That's $15. And basically what they're doing, as far as I can tell, what Apple's doing is they're basically doing the reverse of what I guess a lot of game consoles do. Game consoles, anytime that you buy an Xbox or a PS4 or anything like that, you've cost the company money because it costs them more to make those things than they're charging for them. So anytime you buy an Xbox, Microsoft has lost money on it. But if they can get an Xbox in your home, then they can make money off of the games that you buy. So they're making their money back by selling you games. And because you have an Xbox or a PS4, you need the games. And so they've basically built a market. And so they're willing to take a loss. Taking a loss on certain things is nothing new. I mean, Amazon, very often, a lot of the stuff that they sell at a discount, sometimes they take a loss on some of that as well. But by keeping you on their platform, they, eventually do make their money back. And so they can afford to take a loss in certain areas so that they can make a profit in other places. And I think what Apple Plus is doing is, by putting out the content so cheaply, I guess what they're planning on doing is selling, the Apple TV boxes and possibly making their money that way. I just bought an Apple TV box. I got it sitting behind me right now. A little simple box. And I didn't buy it just for Apple Plus or even to do Apple Plus, although I'm probably going to wind up doing it. I mean, that's the thing. To take part in the streaming wars and watching all this streaming content, you need some sort of a platform to watch all of it and to watch it conveniently. Now, all of it's available on your PC, but I just don't want to sit at my desk and watch things. So I did wind up getting an Apple TV, and I don't regret it. There is so much stuff. Of course, I mean, you get all the streaming, everything streaming that you can imagine, all the stuff we've talked about before. I mean, Apple Plus is obviously going to be available for it in November, but, Netflix, you can do Amazon, you can watch YouTube. All of that stuff's available. And one thing I didn't know until I got the Apple Plus or the Apple TV is that a lot of the things that, a lot of the online classes stuff that I do, Masterclass, the great courses online, Udemy, a lot of those courses, there are apps on Apple TV to stream them. So now I got all of that stuff on my TV. It's very much simplified everything for me. And since I've had it, I have started watching The Dark Crystal and Carnival Row. That's been my go-to for the last few days.
Excellent. What are you thinking of Dark Crystal?
I'm really enjoying it. Mm-hmm. Now, with Carnival Row and Dark Crystal, I'm basically watching, what I'll do is I'll watch Dark Crystal and then I'll watch Carnival Row. Mm-hmm. And so I'm 3 episodes into both of them at this point.
Switch hitting.
Yeah, it's a bit of a culture shock for sure. They're both fantasies, but they're different. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've seen all of The Dark Crystal at this point, but you've only seen 2 episodes of Carnival Row.
Right. Uh-huh.
You definitely need that 3rd episode. Yeah, the moment you get to watch that, because I don't want to say a whole lot about it, obviously.
Okay. Well, so far from what I see, if you want violence, go to Dark Crystal. Because Dark Crystal is pretty dark.
Yes. Yeah, and if you want adult fun, definitely Carnival Row is there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of story development, and you get a lot of what happened in the past. It's episode 3, for the most part, is a flashback of the war that was going on. Mm-hmm. And how our 2 main characters wound up meeting, and a lot of fascinating stuff. And you get to learn some secrets. More than one, actually. It's about secrets and things like that, and there's a lot of good stuff, and it's definitely something that eventually that you and I are going to have to talk about for sure. So I'm ready for the streaming. Bring it on. Mm-hmm. So, and of course it's there'll be a lot of it coming up, because obviously for Creepshow will be coming out this month, and so Shudder will definitely be part of my package. I'll be getting that, and that just gives us plenty to watch and plenty to talk about.
Lots coming up.
Okay, let's end it with a movie that I saw this weekend, It Chapter 2. And we're gonna make this non-spoiler. We're not going to go into too many spoilers. Now, I know you haven't seen it, so we're going to do this pretty vaguely. Like I said, I don't want to have a whole lot of spoilers. But I will say that it was pretty much what I expected.
Okay.
I did very much enjoy the movie. I did. And a lot of the things that I wanted to see in the movie, I got to see. There were some things that I expected to see in the movie that I won't say expected. There were certain things in the movie I'm like, how are they going to do that? Let me say that there were some places I thought they could go, they didn't go. But there are certain things from the book that wound up in this movie specifically.
Okay.
That I didn't expect. Where it plays closer to the book than the miniseries.
Right.
Although there's a lot of nods for the miniseries in the movie in It Chapter 2. And there's some great cameos in there too. Huh. More than one, actually.
Okay.
And I don't want to mention what they are. If you've been online, you probably know about one, at least one of them. But I really did enjoy the movie. I can see where some people might say that, wow, this is a long movie, because it's almost 3 hours. Uh-huh. And I have to say, some people said this, and I have to agree. I did enjoy the first movie more than I enjoyed this one.
Okay.
Because the first movie was just better constructed, I think. But at the same time, you look at the book. The stuff with the kids is always more interesting than the adults. Mm-hmm. And I would say most of the problems with It Chapter 2, the problems with the movie were the same problems you had with the book. Because the kids are definitely more interesting. Now, there's things they developed in the movie that I think made the adult story more interesting, but it's not cooler than the kid stuff. And we talked about this last week, the de-aging of the kids.
Yeah.
It wasn't really that distracting, I have to say.
Oh.
I mean, probably Finn Wolfhard, they had to work the hardest on to de-age him because he's changed the most, I think. Mm-hmm. But, they had to pretty much do that with everybody. And I mean, you can definitely tell because if you see Sophia Lillis, who played the young Beverly Marsh, I saw a trailer for her in a movie she's in now called Gretel and Hansel.
Oh, I know she did Nancy Drew, but
yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and you can tell she's grown. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's not quite an adult yet, but you can definitely tell a difference between what she looks like now and what she looked like a couple of years ago. But yeah, kids grow up fast. That's just kind of the way that it works. But there was some stuff with the kids in there that I thought was really interesting. I think it probably would have saved them a lot of effort and time and CG expense if they would have went ahead and filmed those things with the kids when they had them for the first movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That probably would have saved them a great deal.
So it sounds like that the second movie was structured much like the book was, the constant back and forth.
Right.
Back and forth.
Yeah, where in the first movie, you're just with the kids, obviously. But with the second one, yes, there's a lot of back and forth going on to kind of fill in some places that they didn't really dive into in the first movie. Like, for example, if you remember in the book, the clubhouse. Mm-hmm. You never see the clubhouse in the first movie, but you do see it here.
Okay.
And it does play a part in the second movie. And so one thing I will definitely say about the movie is there's a certain revelation between Beverly and Ben that in the miniseries, it just kind of happens. But in the movie, it happens at a very crucial moment where basically it's, and again, I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't really want to go into spoilers for this, but it happens at a moment when it really needed to happen.
Aww.
And honestly, it was a really beautiful moment, I have to say. So I would definitely say it's worth a watch. It's definitely worth checking out. And like I said, we wanted to go spoiler-free on this, but we are going to do a spoilerific review on this. And it's going to be our inaugural episode of Brian Ruins a Movie. And if you want to check that out, it's going to be patron-only broadcast. You'll be able to see this on patreon.com/geekwatch. And it's going to be, it's part of the beginning of a lot of new content we're going to be creating for Patreon. And so if you're interested in it, check it out at patreon.com/geekwatch.
Say it one more time. You have to say it 3 times.
Oh, exactly. Mm-hmm. And I have to look into a mirror when I say it. But it's patreon.com/geekwatch. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 82 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.